It's chapter number 16 from your economics book of grade 12, and the name of the chapter is Fiscal Policy. And we are going to start from the meaning and instruments of the fiscal policy. What is the meaning of fiscal policy? Fiscal policy is defined as a policy under which the government uses the instruments of taxation, public spending, and public borrowings to achieve various objectives of economic policy. It is the policy which is concerned with the use of taxation, government expenditure, and public borrowing to influence income, production, employment, and the level of economic activities in the economy. So, fiscal policy is implemented by the government as it involves the decisions that the government has to make regarding the taxation, public expenditure, and government borrowing. Next, what is the meaning of taxes? So, taxes, uh, you can say a compulsory contribution of a person to the government to defray the expenses incurred in the common interest of all without reference to specific benefit conferred. That is, taxes are compulsory payments for people to the government to meet the expenditure incurred by the government on providing common benefits to the people without any corresponding direct return of services or goods by the government to the taxpayer. So there, what is the nature we are having? One is a compulsory contribution. Second is a personal obligation. It's bound. The taxpayer have to pay it, and general benefit. The third character is that the tax received by the received from the taxpayer may not be incurring any kind of benefit right alone. No quid pro quo. That is, an important characteristics of the tax is that there is no quid pro quo, or sometimes given in return, promised by the government to the taxpayer. There is no direct give and take relation between the government and the taxpayer. Types of taxes, we're having the direct tax and the indirect tax. So, direct tax, that means the impact of the tax and the incident of the tax is on the same person. So impact means upon whom the tax is applied, and incident means who is paying the tax. So upon whom it is implemented, that is impact, and who is paying, that is the incident, is on the same person, that is called the direct taxation. For example, we can say income tax. The impact of the tax refers to the burden of a tax on the person who pays it to the government on the first instance. The incidence of the tax refers to the money burden of a tax on the person who ultimately pays it. So, accordingly, a direct tax is that tax whose burden is borne by the same person on whom it is levied. So, we can say about the income tax, right? We are having the indirect tax, and indirect tax is a tax which is initially imposed on and paid by one individual, but the burden of which is passed over to some other individual who ultimately bears it. So here we are saying that the indirect tax, the impact and the incident is on two different persons. For example, the sales tax, for example the GST tax, right? Next, a direct tax is one which is levied on the income and property of a person, as I've told you. An indirect tax, on the other hand, is the one which is levied on an expenditure incurred. Next, what are the merits of direct tax? It is economical. Economical means direct tax are economical in the sense that the cost of collection of these taxes are relatively low more than that of usually of the indirect taxes. So, certainty. Direct taxes satisfy the canon of certainty, that is, the taxpayer know how much they have to pay and on what basis they are paying. Equitable. Direct taxes can be made a comfort of the principle of ability to pay by choosing the appropriate tax rate schedules. So, reducing inequalities. Direct taxes are progressive in nature, so rich people are subject of the higher rate of taxation as compared to the poor people. Elastic. Another advantage of direct tax is that these taxes are elastic, as the tax revenue can be increased by raising the tax rates. Civic consciousness. Direct tax incur a spirit of civic responsibility among the taxpayers. Simplicity. Direct tax are generally easy and simple to understand. Demerits of the direct taxes, it is unpopular. So direct taxes are directly imposed on individual, thus it becomes very unpopular as a taxpayer feels that pinch directly. A possibility of tax evasion, that means avoiding the tax. Direct taxes encourage the tax evasion, and people conceal their income from the tax officers by manipulating their accounts so they have to pay the less amount of tax. This leads to the generation of black money or uncounted income. Inconvenient. The main drawback of direct tax is that they cause a lot of inconvenience to the taxpayers. Direct taxes are inconvenient and to the taxpayers. Sometimes the taxpayers are required to pay extra tax as in one installment, which causes inconvenience to the taxpayers. Next, we are having adverse effect will to work. On the will to work and save, direct taxes may have adverse effect on the will to work. High rates of income tax, for example, may discourage the people from working hard or working overtime. Arbitrariness. It is difficult to determine the precise degree of progression and in the direct tax because it is difficult to measure the ability of pay of the people. Narrow base. As a direct taxes are generally imposed on certain group of persons like higher income earners, cooperatives rather than on all the groups. What are the merits of the indirect taxes? So indirect taxes are inconvenient. So how they are convenient? As I was saying is that the direct taxes are inconvenient. Here indirect taxes are convenient. Indirect taxes have the greater merit of convenience. They are paid in small amounts at an intervals instead of one lump sum amount as the when consumers as purchase goods and services. Number 2 is elastic. Earns from indirect taxes can be made elastic through proper sections and of the goods, selections of the goods for levying such taxes. Indirect taxes can be made elastic and productive. Less chance of tax evasion. Another merit of indirect tax is that with proper administration, the changes as of tax evasion of indirect tax are very less. Wide coverage. As indirect taxes has to be paid by everyone, and whether rich or poor, who buys the good on which tax is imposed. These taxes can be imposed on a large variety of goods so that most of the persons contribute something to the revenue of the government. Next, we're having equity. Indirect taxes can be made equitable by imposing heavy taxes on luxurious goods consumed by the rich consumers and lower taxes on the essential commodities. Social welfare. Indirect taxes can be used to increase social welfare. Heavy indirect taxes on articles such as undesirable and injurious to health like wine, cigarettes, etc may restrict their consumption by raising their prices. Promote production and investment. Indirect taxes can be used to allocate resources in accordance with the requirements of the economy. So, what are the demerits of indirect taxes? Regressive and unjust. The main drawback of the indirect taxes is that they are regressive and therefore unjust. Indirect taxes are generally imposed on the consumption of the goods. Tax rate of such taxes is uniform for rich or poor alike. They are indiscriminately in the sense that you can say the poor people have to pay much more or have to pay as much as the rich are paying for that commodity. Inflationary impact. Another weakness of the indirect tax is that they feed inflationary forces. The imposition of an indirect tax on the commodity increase its price. This may lead to increase in the cost of living as a result on which trade unions may demand higher wages to maintain the real income of the workers. Uneconomical. The administration The administrative cost of collecting indirect taxes are generally heavy because they have to be collected from the large number of persons. Uncertainty: the revenue from the indirect taxes cannot be estimated accurately. An indirect tax on the commodity leads to a rise in the market price of the commodity. Lack of civic consciousness. So indirect taxes as are collected through traders and manufacturers. Beside, they are collected in small amounts indirectly through market prices. In many cases, indirect taxes like excise duty are hidden in the price structure. Next, we are having what is public expenditure. Public expenditure refers to the expense incurred by the public authority, that is the central government or the state government and local bodies, is for its own maintenance and also for meeting the collective needs of the citizens and or for promoting their economic and social welfare. Next, what is the importance of public expenditure? Our first is public expenditure is not merely a financial mechanism for incurring expenditure. It is an instrument of immense importance. First is what is the effect of public expenditure on production? And first is public expenditure helps in generating income of various individuals and firms as a result of purchasing of goods and services and factory services for them, factor services for them. Number two, public expenditure can help in increasing productivity or production in the economy by increasing the efficiency of the people. Number three, public expenditure can be used to create human skills through education and training. Public expenditure can be used for as a means of production, essentially raw materials and other important inputs in the public sector. Number five, public expenditure is helpful in promoting the development of basic and key industries is such as capital good industries. Number six, public expenditure are incurred in the providing social security schemes such as the old age pension, unemployment allowances, and so on. What is the effect of public expenditure on investments? Number one, public expenditure on maintenance of law and order creates confidence in the minds of the investors and encourages the undertaking investments. So public expenditure can be directly used to create social overheads as in the form of human capital. Number three, creation and maintenance of economic overheads such as power, irrigation, transport, communication, and motivate the productions or the producers to undertake the investments. Number four, the government may provide financial assistance to the subsidies is to the private sector and thereby stimulate investment. What is the effect of public expenditure on the income distribution? Number one, public expenditure can be so diverse as to help the poor section of the society and thereby reduce inequality in the income. Number two is public expenditure can be effectively used to reduce regional disparities, that is differences as well. What is the effect of public expenditure on the economic growth? Public expenditure promotes economic development directly by developing economic overheads and infrastructures and establish capital good industries and basic and key industries. Number two, public expenditures may stimulate economic development indirectly by providing education, training, and research facilities. Number three, public expenditure in the form of subsidies can help in stimulating agriculture and industrial development. Number four, public expenditure policy can be effectively used to reduce glaring disparities in income and wealth as well as to the reduce regional disparities. Thus, public expenditure helps in achieving the goal with social growth of the social justice. Next, what is public debt? The total understanding that the loans by the government go on the name of the government, or you can say the public debt. Public debt is the debt to which the government owes to its subjects or to the nations of the other countries. In other words, public debt refers to the loan raised by the government and from within the country or from outside the government. Outside the country, the government may borrow from the individual, business enterprises, or from the banks. This is public debt. Here public means the government. What are the methods of debt redemption? Okay, number one is refunding. Refunding is the process by which the government raises new bonds to pay off the maturity bonds. Thus, the government takes a fresh loan to repay the old loans. Okay, next we are having that repudiation and of debt. Repudiation means refusal to pay a debt by the government. When the government repudiates public debt, it does not recognize its obligation to pay the loan. It refuses to pay the interest as well as the principal amount of debt because of the financial constraints. Yes, we are having the debt conversion. So conversion of public debt means that exchange of the new debt for the old debt. In this method, the loan is actually not repaid, but the form of the debt is changed. Budgetary surplus. Sometimes the government is able to generate a surplus in its budget, and it can use this budget surplus to pay off the debt of the people. Terminal annuities is under this method the government pays its debt in equal annual installments, and so which include interest as well as the principal amount of the debt. The annual payments are called annuities. Is sinking funds. Sometimes the government establishes a separate fund known as a sinking fund for the purpose of repaying the loans or the debts. As a statutory reduction in the rate of the interest, sometimes the government takes the statutory decisions to reduce the rate of interest payable to the public debt. The creditors are forced to accept the reduced rate of interest in the view of the statutory powers of the government. What is deficit financing? So deficit financing means meeting the deficit, that means amount is less, deficit between the government expenditure and revenue used through the creation of a new money. The term deficit finance, however, has been defined in a different ways in the different countries. So if the government is not able to meet its expenditure through usual source of its revenue, it may resort to the deficit financing to meet the deficit. Thank you.